Hello, welcome to the CIRS Healing Collective Expert Guest Video Series. I'm Jenny Johnson, the host and facilitator of the CIRS Healing Collective, which has been a resource for aspiring CIRS overcomers to share and connect from around the world since 2020. I'm a shoemaker proficiency partner and CIRS coach, and most importantly, an overcomer myself. What you're about to see is a 10-minute excerpt from a 90-minute group discussion that members of the CIRS Healing Collective got to have live with this expert guest. If you would like to see the full 90-minute replay, come on over to the CIRS Healing Collective. We have a robust video library from the past 5 or 6 years of so many expert guests. Better yet, you'll be able to join our future monthly live discussions with experts to come. We'd love to have you. Makes our inspection different than, maybe just a standard inspection? How can we best advocate for ourselves when we're hiring an inspector?
There's a lot of resources that will summarize what I'm telling you guys, and admittedly, a lot of them are available on the International Society for Environmentally Acquired Illness, or ICI.org. There's a bunch of other organizations that are different from them, but these people have been releasing all of that information publicly. I'll tell you, one of the biggest thing is a set of ears. Are these people coming out to you like a delivery person that just wants to, take your money, go to the next job, and just do that traditional bias? Are they really treating it like a MacGyver, Sherlock Holmes, trying to, like, I guess the best way to explain it in the fewest words possible is traditional inspections seem to be more about unless you can prove it, it's not there. And with the other side of things, like a CIRS focused inspection, it's more like paying attention to the little details. Because if you stop and think about it, seldom do we walk into a home with 20 square feet of mold growth on a wall and a homeowner goes, "Do you think that's a problem?" That's an easy one. That's throwing me a softball pitch. I mean, of course we want to address that. A lot of our exposures are hidden, and a lot of traditional inspections are missing that, because what you're seeing with traditional inspections are people taking like 5-minute spore trap samples in the living room, and then they're saying they're, not every single time, but most of the time, there's not an issue in the home. And then you're getting to that classic argument with your doctor who says, "Well, I think you're still having exposure, and you don't get any binders unless you get a clean home." We've all been there. It's like annoying. And you just go back and forth. So I think a good inspector is going to take the time to do more forensic type of sampling, whether it's MSQ-PCR analysis. You guys might know that as an ERMI or a HERTS-ME. Somebody who might come prepared to do cavity samples. Say there was water damage or there was a known suspected thing that occurred behind there. A traditional inspector might look at that wall and go, "Oh, it's dry. I used a moisture meter." And it's like, we don't care if it's dry. We care that there was a water leak there, and maybe we can do a sample in that wall cavity to see if we can find a source. It's that really that proper mindset. And I wish there was maybe a more mic drop way of explaining it, but everyone carries the same flashlight. Everybody carries the same moisture meter. So those are all the same things. It's that attitude to not just fall short. So if you do talk to an inspector, you need to ask them, are they aware of CIRS? Do they support the use of, you might say ERMI samples, and you might get a little bit of, Jenny, we might need to talk about this for a second, a difference between relying on the ERMI score versus the individual data you get within an ERMI. And can you do cavity samples? Are you able to check out the air conditioning system? Oh, air conditioning system, you live in Colorado, there's no problem there. Incorrect. We see mold in air conditioning systems no matter what the climate is. And yes, I'm certainly Miami, Florida, and places like tropical climates like Hawaii are more prone to have them, but it doesn't mean we're free. On the remediation side, I'll just kind of switch real quick. When we talk about the remediator, it's a similar narrative. Now, they're not necessarily doing the inspections, but hey, are they fogging harsh chemicals in your home? Are they saying that we need to put an antimicrobial in your home? That is not supported in the industry. And you might hear somebody say, "Well, yes, it is." Okay, well, let's duke it out and let's talk about it. The S520 is a major mold remediation standard, and it's accepted by many people in the industry, including insurance companies. So that should tell you something. And it's actually a pretty good standard out there. When they get into the topic of antimicrobials, they're very careful about their use. They don't just say whimsically spray it around. If you have to use an antimicrobial, you haven't solved the moisture problem. If you haven't solved the moisture problem, the mold's going to come back regardless of the antimicrobial. It'll grow on the dust that's on top of the antimicrobial. And so takeaways, working with a company that understands your illness, that doesn't focus on chemicals to solve your problem, but good old-fashioned physical removal. Now, within the weeds of that, to your point, Jenny, about individual cases and situations, I think it does boil down to working with an IEP who can oversee, because many of you, or at least some of you, might be going, well, Mike, I hear you, but I go online, I look for a remediation company, and they all have the nice glossy website, but they when you actually get down to the numbers and see what they're doing, they are recommending the antimicrobials, they are recommending the fogging, they only HEPA vacuum my surfaces. I need help. And the good news about that is you have a couple different ways to do that. You can get free resources, Jenny, like the Surviving Mold Microbial Remediation document that is for free. The people that helped write that document decided to make it free for the public instead of charging money so you would have access to it. You can work with an IEP like myself or some of the other people that Jenny mentioned to help quarterback that. But honestly, I think it's worth that money. If you spend $300-500 or thereabouts to have somebody quarterback the job for you to save tens of thousands of dollars in remediation and cleaning, it's one way to help ensure that the remediation company that you're working with is not going to just haphazardly use chemicals, even though you may or may not be chemically sensitive. Is not going to bear with me, not going to set up containments in a manner that aren't really successful and they are shown to cross-contaminate or they fall down after the second day of install. Jenny Johnson mentioned to you earlier about the course we're working on with the CIRS X Institute. One of the reasons why we're working on that is because I can't look you all in the face and say everybody in all of your communities should have more than enough remediators that know how to do the job right. The fact of the matter is that most of them do not. And the solution is either they take this course to help get that awareness, or you have somebody like myself to oversee it. Long-winded answer, Jenny. I'm sorry. Such a juicy topic to go over.
No, great stuff. And I want to go back. I think I saw a theme that kind of ties together. When you're talking about inspections, say there was a historical issue in there, the wall maybe had been wet at one time, it's not anymore. Inspector A is going to come and say, well, if it's dry, it's not a problem. And so I use my FLIR camera or I use my moisture meter, it's dry, so there can't be live mold. So that's where we pause right there. And you said a CIRS inspector would still want to inspect that wall, even if the mold, even if it wasn't wet anymore. And would the reason be because even dead mold is important for CIRS people? And so it doesn't matter. We're not just looking for live mold, we're looking for live or maybe dormant or dead. Right.
And so two responses really quick. Number one, yes, to answer your question. And number two, if it helps you, if anybody here is hearing that and going, man, I just feel so conflicted. I've heard so many things and killing is the way to go or whatever. Even the EPA, which we don't normally reference because they're typically a decade behind the times and certainly not geared for CIRS, even they on their website saying that killing is not a solution because there's still allergenic and toxigenic properties. We've known this for a long time, but it's easy for a company to show up to your house, charge you $3,000-4,000 to fog some chemical and tell you that they've killed the problem, they've solved it. But if you're still going to have an inflammatory response to Jenny's question, you haven't solved the problem by killing it. In fact, you've probably complicated it because now you still left some of the problem in the home. Oh, and by the way, you've added a chemical in your home that has the ability to quote unquote kill mold and bacteria, but somehow, and this is a sarcastic question, doesn't have the ability to hurt your sensitive lung tissue or other parts of your body. So it's really backwards in the way of thinking. And I feel like because there's not a mold police like Mike Schrantz walking around with a 6-shooter on his hip, it's really hard to force these people to be accountable. And that's some of the reasons that we're seeing the issues we are in the industry, Jenny.
So an inspector who's going to be curious about where might there be dormant, dry mold, dead mold, that still matters. And that in our ERMI, what you call the MSQ PCR, when we do those dust samples, that's picking up evidence of live or dead. And so whatever shows up on there, if an inspector comes and they do an air sample in the middle of our living room and they say, no, we can't support your ERMI because none of this is in your air. Well, it could be dead little pieces on the floor or behind the wall, right? And so that's where we need an inspector who's like, okay, well, if this showed up in your dust, let's see if we can figure out where it may have started, 5 years ago and could still be emanating little particles that are making you sick. So we need to do some investigation of historical leaks or looking for signs of cracks or bubbling or old stains that may be dry, to figure out, could there be mold in that ceiling cavity or under that floorboard that is dry, but it's still contributing to this elevated maybe ERMI or Hertzsprung